Before we look at circumference, I want to look at some definitions of parts of a circle. I'll start with this part here. Now, this is called the diameter, and the diameter is the distance across the circle. Now, one thing that you need to remember is that the diameter is always twice the radius. Which brings us to another definition. What's the radius? Now, the radius is the distance from the center to the outside. So this part here is the radius. So these are two very important variables that you are going to use to write down the formula for circumference. Now, circumference is the distance around the circle. So circumference So what I mean here is this distance here, the distance around the circle, this one, is what we mean by circumference. Okay? So we have three important things. We have the diameter, we have the radius, and we have the circumference. So what is the relationship between these three watts or variables? What's the relationship between them? Now, circumference is equal to pi multiplied by the diameter. So this is the relationship between circumference and diameter. Pi is just a constant that you can get from the calculator. Now, in short, we can say that circumference is equals to pi, just pi d. That's how we write it, just pi d. So pi times diameter. Now, we also know that the diameter is always twice the radius. So we can write this as pi multiplied by 2 times radius, which means we can rewrite this formula as 2 pi r, where r is the radius. Now, this is basically the formula for circumference. So this formula here is the formula for circumference. Pi d or 2 pi r. If you're given the radius, you can use so basically circumference is equals to pi d or 2 pi r. Okay? So if you're given the radius, use 2 pi r. If you're given the diameter, use pi d. You should be able to get your answer. All right, so we'll look at some problems. Example 1, find the circumference of the following circles. Now, in the first case, we have the radius. So this is the radius. So we'll use the formula. Remember, we said circumference is equals to pi d, or circumference is equals to 2 pi r. So you just have to inspect and find out, what am I given? Am I given the radius? And if I'm given the radius, then I'll use 2 pi r. If I'm given the diameter, I'll use pi d. So in this case here, A, circumference will be equal to 2 pi r. So 2 times pi times the radius, which will give you 37.7 centimeters. In B, again, you have to inspect. This one here is the diameter. So I'm going to use this first formula. Circumference is equals to pi d, which means for B, circumference will be pi d. So pi times our diameter, which is 16, and that gives us 50.3 centimeters. All right, next example, find the perimeter of the following shapes. Now, what you have to do here is, remember, perimeter is distance around the shape. Now, here we have the distance from here to here is 12, but we need to find the distance around the shape, which means I'm going to find half circumference. So this distance here is equal to pi multiplied by the diameter divided by 2, which means that circumference for A will be equal to 12 plus pi multiplied by 12 divided by 2. And then you just plug in that in your calculator and you should be able to get your answer, which is 30.8 centimeters. Now in B, what you'll have to do is, again, inspect, and just you can see that the distance from here to here is 8. The distance from there to there as well will be 8. What we don't know is the distance from this point to that point, which means I'll have to try and find this distance, which will be equal to, now remember here, the diameter here will be equal to 16. So that will be pi multiplied by 16. If you use pi d, that is, divide by 4, because this is a quarter circle. All right. So that distance is equal to that, which means my perimeter, and by the way, this is not circumference, this is perimeter. Sorry, I missed that. So here, perimeter. So my perimeter will be equal to pi multiplied by 16 divided by 4 plus 8 plus 8. And that will be equal to 16 plus 12.6, which gives you 28.6. All right, so very important, you have to inspect, find out what kind of a shape you're given, and then you decide which formulas to use. Example 3, find the perimeter of the following shapes. Now, again, we'll start by inspecting. The distance from here to here is 2, but now the distance from here to here is unknown, but I can find it because that will be equal to, if I can just use a different, so that distance there will be equal to pi multiplied by diameter divided by 2, which means the perimeter of this shape, so perimeter will be 2 plus 6 plus, oops, this is, that's not 8, that's 2. So 2 plus 6 plus 2 plus pi multiplied by 6 over 2. So 2 plus 6 plus 2 plus pi multiplied by 6 over 2, which will be equal to 10 plus 9.4, and that should give you 19.4 centimeters. In the next example, again, just following through that. Um, distance from here to here is 1. From here to here as well, it's 1. But we don't know the distance from this point to that point, and we don't know the distance from that point to that point. All right. In fact, let me use the same colors here, just to help you visualize this. So we don't know the distance from this point to that point, and we don't know the distance from this point to this point. But we know that this is half a circle and that's a half a circle, which means we can find that, which will be pi multiplied by 5 divided by 2, and that as well will be pi multiplied by 5 divided by 2. That will be that distance, which means that the perimeter will be equal to 1 plus 1 plus pi multiplied by 5 divided by 2 plus pi multiplied by 5 divided by 2. Which means that will be, if you just plug in your calculator, that will be equal to 17.7 centimeters. All right, so just need to inspect, look through what you're trying to find, and you apply the formulas that we discussed. Last question. So again here, by inspecting, distance from there to there is 4, which means distance from there to there is 4 as well. From here to here, because that's the radius of the circle, yeah? So that will be 4 as well. From there to there is 4. What we don't know is the distance from this point to that point, and the distance from this point to that point. So what you're going to do is, we know that the distance from this point to this point, just use a different color, so that we have that, we have that. So this distance here, it's a quarter circle, which means that will be, and the diameter is 8, so pi multiplied by 8 divided by 4. And that as well will be pi multiplied by 8 divided by 4, which means the perimeter of this shape, so perimeter will be equal to pi multiplied by 8 divided by 4 plus pi multiplied by 8 divided by 4. You can just double that, gives you half a circle. Plus 4 plus 4 plus 4 plus 4. We end up with 6.28 plus 6.28 plus 16. That will give us 28.56 centimeters.